Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Hello there. This is going to be the beginning of our summer season. I did a summer season last year, so they're a little bit shorter, a little bit different. This summer, though, I think is going to be really fucking fun. I'm very excited about it. I know I say that at the beginning of every episode, but it's always true. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what I think are incredibly iconic and also disruptive artists. And because of where I've come from and my own journey, I'm starting with musicians, but we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this lands. This was inspired by an episode I did for New Year's Eve, which I will share in the show notes. What would Zappa do? Frank Zappa obviously changed the landscape for, I would say, like working musicians, in the sense that like being able to hold that businessman and very avant-garde disruptive creator, he somehow managed to hold that paradox incredibly well. And despite what you think of Zappa, what he did, how he inspired, how he crafted, how he created was incredibly different. And he really did carve a path. I encourage you to listen to that episode. Having said that, let me be very fucking clear. I've not done a deep dive into their careers, into their musicianship, into their writing, their genre defying music. Like, there are plenty of resources out there for that. And on the one hand, I've absolutely indulged in those and have done some homework. But I really wanted to focus on how these creators and artists viewed their craft through an entrepreneurial lens. So the reason I am doing this for you is to give you some perspective on how you can apply their ways of working in your day-to-day so that you can create some really mind-bending art, whether that's your business or your writing or your speaking, or even just the way that you're thinking about these things. Like, I've had the privilege of working with some very recognizable household names when it comes to the arts. And one of the things that I noticed about these people over the decades of working with very, very different creators and crafters and trailblazers and rule breakers and believers and dreamers and visionaries, right, is they couldn't actually do anything else. And I just had this conversation with a very young artist and creator and woman in the woods while I was getting absolutely destroyed by fucking no-see-ums and mosquitoes. I said, you don't have to be worried about the good ideas leaving you. Like, she had been in a relatively dark place, because we all have in this particular region. And she said that she just stopped writing. She stopped capturing her ideas, and she was very, very scared of losing them. And I said, the good ones don't go away. They're the ones that keep you up at night. They're the ones that always circle back around. And even, you know, the Elizabeth Gilberts and the Big Magics and have I shared this quote with you yet that I heard recently? I'll get to it in 2 seconds. But what I noticed about the most successful artists that I got to work with, and I do mean success in terms of monetary success, in terms of the fact that they were truly able to not just monetize their art and craft, but like sustain and support a family and multiple other people in terms of employment and business. They couldn't do anything else. Like, their art not only kept them up at night, but it kind of drove them mad. And we're going to see that thread through all of these people that I talk about. So I have a handful ready. I'm going to record a few of these episodes today. I'm going to give you this spiel at the beginning of a lot of episodes, so full permission to like skip through, because I want to make it really clear. I am not talking about these artists as if I'm an expert in any one of them, nor am I trying to talk about their art. What I am really going to look at is how they built business in their way. And if you've been paying any attention at all, you know that that's sort of my raison d'etre when it comes to this and this work and why I create this. I do believe that we are all creatives. I do believe that business is a process of creation. And I have seen this proven over and over and over again. When you do it your way, that is your unique differentiator. That is what will wake you up in the morning. That is your why, is it's giving yourself permission to actually just be 100% you. And that's the thing that's going to make it so special. And that's what these artists did. And that's why you're going to recognize every single one of them. You're going to know half of the songs, if not all of the songs I put on their playlists. And I just think that's really fucking cool, because when they first started, and I was having this other conversation with was it an artist? Who was I actually sharing this with? Someone, a creative, a chef, a restaurateur, if you will. And he was talking about the commercial music industry. And I said, I'd always worked in independent music and independent business. And at the end of the day, there was zero success and there was zero money until there wasn't. And everybody thought we were fucking crazy, boho, punk, hippies, whatever label, until they were headlining internationally known festivals, So, or like hitting bestseller lists or being acclaimed in various art magazines. It's like, if you're doing this for that external validation, it's just a different game. And what I love about the people we'll talk about all summer, a summer in the Northern Hemisphere, all winter for all y'all joining me from the South, the deep South, if you will. These people did it because they couldn't do anything else. And it's that driving force that I think makes like real magic. So anywho, thank you for my little TED Talk. Let's get going. I'm going to call all of these, what would the artist do, right? So this is what would David Bowie do, WWDBD. And I am going to try and take like a smattering, like I'm working towards getting a variety of artists. But what I will say is I've got 8 canned. If there are any artists you would like me to do this deep dive into and any research I can provide you, I would love to hear from you. hello@NicoleBZ.com. Sometimes I even check that email address. You're welcome. So yeah, let's get into what would David Bowie do. And it's obvious why I picked Bowie. But perhaps some of the things we're going to talk about, why he was so disruptive, how he truly trailblazed. Because again, like we look at it from the now. This was the same reason I got so excited about the Quantum Business Book Club. There's this element of time travel I'm asking you to do, because when Bowie started doing Bowie, it was almost unacceptable. And a lot of these artists, when they got started, were told, this is impossible. You cannot do what you're doing. They were threatened by any of the business people that they were working with, including the people that they relied directly upon, from management to publishing to agents to legal. I also like summer. We're going to be a little bit more casual with this. So I just want to have some fun with you guys. Anywho, let's get into it. Brand like Bowie, identity as a business strategy. If you know, you know. What if your brand isn't your logo, your voice, or what you're selling? What if your brand is just your latest LARP? It is your creative identity. And for anybody in the service industry or anybody who's been playing around with or even having a very established personal brand, you know what I'm talking about. You're not confused. You're not flaky. You're not inconsistent. You're not crazy. You're just between personas. And no one knew how to shapeshift for the sake of art, relevance, or maybe just plain old survival, like David Bowie. So we're not just talking about Ziggy Stardust because Ziggy Stardust was fucking cool. We're talking about Ziggy Stardust because they're a business model. So in this episode of You Know Everything, we're going to turn weirdos into wealth builders, and we're going to brand like Bowie. David Bowie didn't chase relevance. He engineered it. And every few years, he would perform the ultimate founder move, the ultimate rebrand. He would kill the current version of himself and build the next one strategically, beautifully, violently, tragically. And like I said, having kind of just absorbed some of the immense amount of Bowie research and material and interviews out there, he never thought about his implosions, at least in retrospect and in hindsight, as problems. Now, if you look at and we'll get into some of this, a little bit of it. That is not how other people perceived it. Zoe had some hardcore mental health issues. He had a very, very real, very, very intense cocaine addiction. And they kind of encapsulated these different epochs, these different eras in his life or their life. And these characters that he would play. And oftentimes they were inspired by these very heavy, very dramatic turns and transitions in his life. And to hear him talk about that as he grew in experience and wisdom, again, he never labeled them negative. And he often talked about how Americans are always about just having a good time and always trying to water down the hard bits. But it was in his leaning into those that he truly transformed. It's where his art, I don't want to say was crafted from, but it absolutely inspired his art and a lot of the characters that he played. And you'll start to see sort of a cadence and a rhythm in his creative process, in his business, that relates directly to the challenges. He didn't necessarily it wasn't so much of a Madonna move, who I think was truly a master as well at rebranding and we talk a lot about this avatar design and character playing, right? And I talked a lot about that actually in my last loop, the newsletter that I send out every week. I hope you're signed up for that. But Madonna, it really did feel like she was absolutely stepping into a different persona, but it felt a little more mechanized. And with, as she would start creating a new body of work, AKA a new album, she sort of stepped into this persona. And there's a reason she's not in this series, right? Bowie felt like these characters, it was almost like a walk-in would take over him, her, their, whomever, whatever they were experiencing. And he was almost beholden to this muse as they crafted not only his art, but his life and his community and his connections. And Ziggy Stardust wasn't just eyeliner and a space persona and outfit. It was this hyper niche product. And you'll hear me talk about art as a product a lot because I think words are powerful and it makes us cringe when we think about art as product. But what we're just describing is something we sell. And I don't think art needs to be sold. I don't think your magic, I don't think your passion has to have a monetary value assigned to it in order for it to be worthwhile. I feel like we create because we have to, kind of like what I was talking about at the beginning. I talk about art as product because there's a difference when you're selling it. That's all. It's just a different energetic kind of exchange, I think. And I think Bowie got this. Ziggy Stardust was this alien prophet who could only exist for one tour, one album cycle, and one moment in culture. And then they were, off to another galaxy. And it would have been really easy to say, this is working. I'm going to continue to embody this. But the only thing scarier than creating this whole new persona and this kind of mind-bending pop culture transforming character is that actually works. I mean, despite everything saying and screaming no, I think there's interviewers who literally walked off stage. Bowie was just so confrontational in those interviews because he lived it. I mean, he was doing, what's the whole method acting? It was, was he even acting? Some of it, that might've just been who he was. We'll never really know because we're not Bowie. And I love these kind of the way that he challenges you to question, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Who's it for? So the only thing scarier than riding the coattails of this very successful character you've created is killing them off. Bowie understood sustainability doesn't come from staying the same. It comes from staying aligned. He pivoted before the market could pivot on him. And that's terrifying because you will abandon fans. You will abandon supporters. A lot of the people, especially in art, especially in music, you work with specific players and specific engineers and even specific business people because they get what you do. So when you kill that off, you might need a whole different team and fam around you. It's not about faking it until you become it. You know, that's my favorite catchphrase. It's like faking it to truly be prolific. And so you keep making things to see what fits, what feels aligned. What is that creative thread that when I start pulling on it, like everything comes undone. And then I have this wealth of material to craft something I could have never even imagined. Bowie taught us that you don't have to be air quotes authentic and the way like LinkedIn wants you to be. You have to be embodied, fully, fiercely, fictionally, if necessary. He treated his personas almost like intellectual property. Like each one of these characters were his trademark in that moment. It was this tangible idea. You could see, smell, taste, hear, feel, and he fucking owned it. It was like a prototype, like a sacred mask one would wear in ceremony. Some of these you might be familiar with, some of these you might not. Ziggy Stardust, we all know, and some of us love. If you're listening, I trust you at least know of Ziggy enough to appreciate what Ziggy did. Aladdin Sane, The Thin White Duke, The Man Who Fell to Earth. And some very Bowie hardcores would argue that these weren't necessarily characters so much as people within a song. Like it wasn't a character that Bowie truly embodied for as a measurable amount of time. It was more the what's the word I'm looking for? The protagonist in some of the material that Bowie created. Each one of these protagonist characters, aliens, whatever label you want to apply, they allowed Bowie to channel a different message, to serve a different audience, to play in a different space, and to connect on different levels. And I don't know if you've ever, it's so funny, like having watched some of these iconic songs actually get written and made and recorded and produced, and I would hear fans say what they think that song is about. Then I would know what the songwriter was writing about, and they were not the same. And I love that. Like, I love that art is open to interpretation. And to me, music is like this very universal language that can connect with us on a level, on an emotional level. And quite frankly, there are some songs that have literally kept me alive, depending on like the different experiences that I'm going through. And I don't know that that's what the creator wanted to do, but it is absolutely what happened. And I just think that that is also like both time travel and magic. So back to the characters. If you don't know, now you will. Ziggy Stardust was this flamboyant and non-binary alter ego circa early 70s. The Messiah rock star was how Bowie kind of talked about the inception of Ziggy Stardust. The Thin White Duke was a character from the later 70s album Station to Station, and an Aryan, he was an Aryan fascist, which is like really intense, especially for a character to follow Ziggy Stardust. This might have had something to do with that aforementioned cocaine addiction. The Thin White Duke, get it? But a very, very dark character, very formal character, and a huge, huge step from Ziggy. Ziggy was color and sparkle and fun and flamboyant. The Thin White Duke was dark and angular and disciplined, right? There was Pierrot, the sad clown, who was trusting but naive. There was Major Tom, who was a character from the song Space Oddity, but Bowie talks about as being very autobiographical. There was Aladdin Sane, who, again, not so much a character, but the title of an album and a song in a moment, an energy that Bowie absolutely embodied. There was Halloween Jack, who was a character from the song Diamond Dogs. There was Jareth, the Goblin King. Okay, sorry, I had to. If you know, you know. Button Eyes, the Blind Prophet from his 2015 release. And anybody who's familiar will absolutely tune into how different each one of these characters, each of these moments felt And if you're a fan of Bowie's, I mean, even as I'm talking about these different characters, I felt them almost in like different parts of my body. What he was going through as an artist, what he was going through as a business person, as a man, as someone exploring gender and gender roles, as someone just living in different places. I mean, he lived all over. He lived all over. I'll leave it at that. But I know some of these characters were very Los Angeles centric. Some of them were very UK centric. Some of them were very New York centric. Some of them were very tour centric. So it just kind of depended on where he was and what he was doing and what he was creating. He wasn't rebranding. He was truly transforming who he was in order to understand and procreate. He was reborn in each one of these eras. So how can this apply to you, right? Like, how can you use this in your own creative process, your own business, your own entrepreneurial endeavors? And what Bowie consistently said across tons of different interviews, thank you, YouTube, like, you do not create for your audience. You create for you. You don't owe your audience anything. You don't owe them consistency. All you owe them is truth. And the truth is you will evolve. You will outgrow your niche, your target market, your fans. You're allowed to. You're allowed to let go of your products, your pricing, your brand, your persona, if it doesn't light you up anymore. And you're allowed to reinvent yourself as often as you need to survive the future. In the 21st century, building a brand is not about content. It's about being a container with a beginning and an end. It's about channeling, tuning into the new you now. Bowie never broke character until it was time to become somebody else. So next time someone tells you you've changed, smile and nod. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. I have, because that's my point, right? Like, that's all by design and by intention. So what would Bowie do in business? And this is, in my experience, like applying to me personally in my own journey, create your own mythology. When I look back on everything I've done, at the time, it felt like a cool opportunity, sometimes a very necessary opportunity. But how it all links together now is kind of mind-blowing. So Bowie wouldn't just make a LinkedIn bio. He would world build. He'd create mythic backstories, eras, and motifs that emotionally anchor each business cycle. He'd make your About You page on your website feel like a Marvel metaverse, right? Like, he was epic in his design, and it touched every single part of his experience. It becomes fun. It's storytelling. I actually, in the last loop, I shared a Notion story builder, and it does just that. It enables you to truly craft and create your own metaverse, like this interdimensional universe that you get to travel between the different planets for different personas. And it kind of pings you in terms of like character development and emotional arc, all of these things we feel like creates a true myth, right? This like hero's journey. And Bowie was an absolute fucking master at that. Launch in eras, not niches. So instead of refining one perfect offer, Bowie would build entire product lines, like albums, fully thematic, emotionally cohesive, and designed for a moment. And then he would retire them with dignity. He was truly able to be in his magic, and he could feel when it was starting to wane. And he just let it go. And there's this huge trend in business happening right now, and you're going to hear it everywhere very soon if you're not already: regenerative. The idea being that there is a life cycle to everything. And I know I've talked about this ad nauseum, but I think this is a different twist on it, in the sense that we are supposed to have a beginning, a maturation, and then an end. And when we can harness that and celebrate those cycles and even plan for those cycles, or the level of mastery is you layer those cycles. So as something is essentially dying, we are in that incubatory inception phase of creating and birthing the next thing. So it feels like this everlasting flow. Now that is much easier said than done. And as I kind of hinted at, there were some incredibly dark and challenging periods in Bowie's life that very literally killed off characters like the Thin White Duke. But when we can look on that and, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, rather than be embarrassed or ashamed or regretful, or most importantly, apologetic about the challenges and less family-friendly experiences we might be going through, we fucking own it. That was an epic time where a bunch of fucking really interesting art was created. Your opinions, not necessarily necessary. Did I just repeat necessary twice? I think I did. But, you know, your opinions are here, not welcome, but heard. In terms of, was it good or bad art, or was it fueled by something healthy or unhealthy? But at the end of the day, like, he fucking owned it, and it was powerful. And we almost love it because it no longer exists. Like, we couldn't go see that performed, or we're not going to get another album of like the same, you know? Anywho, that feeds directly into the next point, which is using mystery as a marketing tool. Once we kind of get a vibe that you never really know what this person's going to do next, you don't know how long this moment is going to last. It creates this sense of intrigue, and it compels people to ask these questions, have these conversations. I mean, how many artists are people creating thousands of YouTube videos about? Bowie would never give anything away on the sales page. He'd tease ideas in riddles. He'd wrap it in visuals. This is why those interviewers literally walk off stage. He would let people feel uncomfortable and challenged, even offended, because it intrigued. It intrigued him, most importantly. Like, you watch some of those Ziggy Stardust interviews or the Thin White Duke, it is hard. Like, for a lot of different reasons, but he pushes us into this space of judgment, and like our brain needs to know what the fuck is happening, and we don't always go to like a positive complimentary space in that. And in fact, when someone pushes you into that corner to kind of fight back, it's much more engaging. In a world of oversharing, Bowie turned privacy into prestige. And I've had this conversation with a lot of artists because there is this expectation that you need to have everything on your fucking feed now. And I do think that works for some people. But in terms of your own entrepreneurial and business endeavors, what if you gave yourself permission to be that mysterious, unfigure-outable creator? You know, what if your business website was just an email form? Could you make that work when giving yourself full permission to not just be ubiquitous across all social media platforms? Finally, Bowie would kill it before it got boring. If it stopped lighting him up, if it stopped intriguing him and challenging him, Bowie would end it. On stage, dramatically, before it fades. And not every character got the sort of funeral procession that like Ziggy Stardust or Zayn did. But what he would say is, don't wait for your audience to tell you when they're not engaged anymore. Reinvent on purpose. I see a lot of actual business owners these days and creators play with this, not from a place of like, I'm creating urgency or scarcity, but truly from a place of that felt magical, and I don't know if it's going to happen again. I will only know that in the moment of creating and connecting with my people. And if at any moment this feels like it's not lighting me up, then it's just not happening again. Some people do actually have like a very identifiable departure, but for others, they just kind of fall off and we don't see them again until they're ready. Finding what works best for you and giving yourself permission to play with either one of those or finding something in between is what we're talking about here. So to kind of bring this into my favorite ways of concluding these episodes, it's like, how can you play with this? What are some tangible tactical tactics? There, we did it. I did it again. Same word twice in a row. But yeah, what are some ways that you can actually apply this to your day-to-day? So play with this. We've been talking a little bit about this, especially in our loops, but invent a character to house your next vision. This isn't just avatar design or like lifestyle leadership. In the anti-business school, I talk a lot about this, like finding different events and places and people and spaces that you can practice showing up as this character. This is like an actual metamorphosis. This is the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. Do everything differently. If your current self is scared, burnt out, or uncertain, create this character, this container that, like, what would Bowie do? Ziggy wasn't just this persona that he played. It gave everybody permission to break all of their rules. What clothes do men wear? What music do women make? What makeup looks like? What hairstyle? How we talk with people? What we eat and consume? Like, Ziggy was permission to let your freak flag fly. Dress for it, speak like it. I could speak like it. That would be useful. Sell like it. Like, give this era a name. You'll hear me often talk about like the next best thing. That is when I know I'm in that incubatory inception phase. I haven't labeled it yet. What I've been playing with professionally is 21st century business building. That's the era that I am labeling. That's how I'm envisioning it. It's the character that I'm playing. And that is still like a work in progress. But, what would Bowie do? He would create an era. He would name it, and he would let that version carry the momentum while the physical self plays catch up. Archive before you evolve. Before Bowie killed Ziggy, he filmed a final show, gave interviews, and closed that loop. Too many entrepreneurs ghost old versions of themselves. And this is where you can kind of lose the trust. I like to think of it as concentric rings, but in terms of those supporters who have been loyal to you, we need to like say the elephant in the room, right? Like, hey, this isn't working anymore. You get to tell whatever story and mythology you want around that. You can frame it however you like. But I do believe there is something very powerful in acknowledging the shift and saying at any point, hey, this will be, and here we are. When you're ready to pivot, ritualize the exit. Host a funeral for your last hurrah. Make a post that says goodbye. Archive the past and honor it. This is how you clean up your future, right? Like, oftentimes when I'm working with people, there's been some shit that went down, and there can be some regret and some resentment around it. There can be some triggers and some wounds that we're currently dealing with. And I literally just had this conversation with a client this morning. I personally don't believe like we can forget our past. And forgiveness, it's not to say I forgot. It's simply to say I can hold this and continue to operate from a place of agency. So I'm not letting that old wound like take the wheel and drive. And what I mean by that is we can recognize that all of those experiences, and this is what Bowie was talking about, they made us who we are. Thin White Duke would not have existed without some really dark moments for Bowie. He wouldn't have been birthed, nor would he have died. And we can honor that without being beholden to that character. Like, I think a lot about like my 18-year-old to 22-year-old self. She was a hardcore activist. She was so fucking angry. And she would think I was the biggest fucking sellout in the world. She is livid with me. And like, we can still hang out and party. You know what I mean? I can honor her. And in fact, I respect her, but I cannot let that much anger drive me anymore. That's what I mean. So archive before you evolve. When you recognize you're not just in the incubation and inception phase, you are reborn, whether it's publicly or just very personally. Most of my inner self funerals, they happen for me. There's an existing post on my social media right now that says something along the lines of like, hey, this hasn't really been a healthy space or a fun space or an illuminating space for me. I don't know if I'm coming back. Never say never, but I haven't been on here since the hurricanes, which was September 27th, 30th, depending on when you stopped sleeping. Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been like almost 8 months at this point. I didn't make a big deal about it. And I'm not sure. I had my own little ceremony around that. So lastly, your disorientation is sacred. Real. Every Bowie rebirth came with a period of collapse, addiction, depression, disillusion. As he gained in, I mean, you'll hear him in interviews say like, I always knew that I was going to be famous and I was going to be rich. He didn't say that in so many words, but he was oddly confident in his ability to just simply be himself and be quote unquote successful, whatever that meant to him. Once you hit certain goals, once you hit certain modicums of success, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about this, and I know it comes with a great deal of privilege, you recognize that validation, those dollar signs, that acclaim, the audience numbers, like they don't make you feel successful. Again, whatever your definition of success is. And you become disillusioned. And that is an incredibly challenging place to create from. And there's a million different words for these experiences. But as Bowie sort of evolved and grew, that became his biggest block. And it almost felt like he could do anything, and therefore none of it was meaningful. That doesn't mean you're broken. It just means your next self is incubating. That's why I call it the next best thing. Like, I don't know how to label that yet. I don't know who I'm stepping into yet. All I know is that I am not what I was, and I am becoming who will be. If you're floating in that void right now, firstly, I'm right here with you. If you're unsure who you're becoming, congratulate yourself. That, I believe, is one of the most challenging places you can be. Survival's actually pretty easy, like food, water, shelter, bills. It becomes very perfunctory. And this is where I think like I love moving so much, because every time you move, like it really distills life into these very simple like to-do lists. But once you've, again, achieved what you set out to, you kind of go, well, okay, this didn't feel the way I expected it to. That disillusion creeps in, and then it becomes hard to vision if it's all just an illusion. You are not lost. You're just in a costume change. Seek out that bliss and that joy. What lit you up just doesn't light you up anymore. Again, this doesn't mean that's the end of the world. It's just the end of that character. It's not for me to ever tell you what to do. What I will offer is there is still joy. There is still gratitude. There is peace. What can you do to seek that out? What can you do to be okay with this exploratory process? And if you want to vibe on that, hit me up. That's what I do. You are making art. And in fact, this isn't just about art. David Bowie didn't just make art. He was the art. You are art. We want to label things like identity or name a studio album, consider it complete once it's mixed and mastered and released and then retired. But that piece of work, that era, that character, it might not be who you are anymore. If that feels hollow, or if you are bored, or if your spark feels like it's gone out, what if it's not burnout? What if it's becoming? What if you don't need to niche down or iterate and improve? What if you get to world build? What if you get to design your next verse in your meta? What if you don't have to be consistent, but you get to seek compelling, the thing that inspires you to move and to act and create? Invent the next you. What would Bowie do? If the world didn't get it, he would make them catch up. Bowie created because he had to. And then once he had enough of this mythology started, he could name it and label it and then be it. And that's all I have to say about that. So thank you. That was fun. We're going to do several of these over the next couple of weeks. So again, you still have an opportunity to share some artists you would love for me to dig into. I'm totally open to keeping this summer going for as long as possible. I had a long, dark winter. I'm here for like a 6-month summer, y'all. So if you're having fun with this, there's a playlist that accompanies. So a handful of songs from all of these different epochs. I'm going to put it on Spotify and on YouTube. The Spotify playlist will be open for editing. So if you want to add any tracks to it, I would love that. So get in there. If you know any, actually, I was going to say, if you know any Bowie fans, and then I was like, no, don't share with them. They're going to have something to say. But look at me being afraid. I meant just like music wise. But okay, that means we're done here. Thank you so much for joining. Bye.